The John Wick films feature some of the most satisfying scenes in modern action cinema. With that in mind, here are the most paused moments in the John Wick franchise. From the ink that shows off John's violent past to all of the other shots that are just plain cool. We all knew going into the first John Wick that things would get violent. What we didn't know was just how a seemingly good-natured guy learned how to beat someone to death with a book or kill 3 men with a pencil. We got our first glimpse of his dark side shortly after his beloved dog was killed, and he decided that he was returning to his old life. Before he set out for the Continental Hotel, John got ready for action with a nice shower, revealing that this quiet suburban widower had a glorious and ominous full back tattoo. There are a few notable elements to this piece of ink, but the most eye-catching by far is the block lettering across the shoulders, which reads Fortis Fortuna Arduat. That's Latin for fortune favors the brave. The entire scene is very shadowy and goes by rather quickly, so unless you're both familiar with Latin and have great eyesight, you're going to want to pause it to take in the full effect. Once you do, you'll see how appropriately it sets the stage for the coming rampage, as John will have some pretty good luck while going directly at his targets like a wrecking ball. Meanwhile, the guy who picked on an adorable puppy and then spends the rest of the movie running away is going to have a pretty rough time. The fight scenes in John Wick are often hailed as some of the best in modern action cinema, and justifiably so. But they're not the only thing about these movies that deserve praise. One element that's often overshadowed is just how beautifully shot these films are. For those of you looking for a new desktop background or phone lock screen, John Wick provides plenty of options. One of our favorites is a shot of John walking away in slow motion from a burning pile of money after he takes on a church that's a front for criminal operations. The cool guy walking away trope has a long and proud tradition in action movies, so much so that The Lonely Island even wrote a song about it. John Wick's spin on the routine doesn't involve an explosion, although a burning pile of cash has its own intensity. But what it lacks in pyrotechnics, it makes up for in pure style. The slow motion, the shadows falling across Keanu Reeves' face, and the flames coming up from behind Wick as he descends deeper into his own personal hell all make it well worth it to hammer that pause button to get your screenshot just right. Keanu Reeves isn't always thought of as the most emotive actor. If you're looking for someone who can pull off goofy spaciness or zen calm, he's your guy. But if you want a performance that's full of emotion and energy, he might not be your first call. But with John Wick, he proves the folly of that belief. True, John has the same quiet, understated intensity that Reeves has brought to plenty of other roles, but that just makes it all the more satisfying when he finally does snap. And snap he does. His first face-to-face confrontation with Michael Nickvis Vigo is one of the most iconic moments of the entire franchise, thanks to that growling delivery of,
"But now, yeah, I'm thinking I'm back."
It's a moment so cool that it was prominently featured in the trailer, and it makes the entire scene incredibly memorable. It's worth pausing for a couple of reasons. For one, we rarely get to witness Reeves in a full-on rage, which makes it pretty easy to believe those rumors that Wick is actually a supernatural creature. Also, considering that this scene builds to Reeves shouting,
"So you can either hand over your son, or you can die screaming alongside him!"
you might need to take a pause just to calm yourself down for a bit. If you're the type of moviegoer who checks doesthedogdie.com before watching anything, John Wick probably isn't the best choice for you. Nevertheless, there actually is plenty in the first movie for dog lovers to enjoy. The most obvious is the fact that the majority of the film is focused on a guy making sure that everyone even remotely involved with being mean to his puppy is met with vengeance. Furthermore, the ending brings him to another furry creature who needs a little help. The scene of John in the veterinary hospital provides an emotional climax that most relationship dramas would be jealous of. That someone is a pit bull who's scheduled to be put to sleep. But this soft-hearted assassin isn't about to just let that happen without doing anything. It's absolutely worth a pause when John lets his new best friend out of his cage, if only because it's one of the best shots of the dog that we get in the entire movie. It's not like we had any doubts that he was a good boy, but it's still nice to get a good long look to know for sure. The first John Wick tells us the basics of the shadowy world of assassins and their preferred hotels. But Chapter 2 really kicks that into high gear as we learn about the markers. They're essentially a physical representation of a favor owed to someone. While they're small enough to fit in a pocket, they carry a considerable weight. If someone has your marker, you can't refuse their request no matter what it is, lest you bring the wrath of the entire assassin world down upon your head. With their typical penchant for drama, the assassins have hidden needles in these medallions so that they can formally seal their favors with bloody thumbprints.
2 rules that cannot be broken, Jonathan. No blood on continental grounds, and every marker must be honored.
The markers embody the compelling design sensibility behind the artifacts of this deadly world, and they make us wish that there was a John Wick art book so that we could see them in detail. For now, we'll have to make do with pausing the few close-up shots that we get that otherwise go by too fast. For a movie that's primarily about Keanu Reeves finding exciting new ways to kill people, a surprising amount of John Wick Chapter 2 takes place in and around museums. In particular, the villainous Santino seems fond of surrounding himself with fine art, which has a nice side effect of providing viewers with some suitably dramatic shots. And that's not the only reason for all that art. It's definitely worth giving the pause button a workout to take a closer look. If you do, you might be able to figure out a little bit of the symbolism on display. Take for instance a scene when John meets up with Santino, agreeing to the favor his marker is demanding. The two of them sit in front of Giovanni Fattori's La Battaglia di Custoza, an 1880 painting depicting a battle from the Third Italian War of Independence. Despite outnumbering their enemies 120,000 to 80,000, the Italian army was forced to retreat, leaving behind thousands of prisoners. It's probably not a stretch to say that Santino parking himself in front of a painting about how overwhelming numbers aren't always going to result in a victory might have some thematic resonance.
This was my father's collection. I see little more than just paint on canvas, of course.
Saying that the John Wick films have great fight scenes is like saying that water is wet. These movies are essentially 6 hours of non-stop crazy battles, with a few breaks for hanging out with dogs. If you're looking for the highlights of the highlights, they don't get much better than the Hall of Mirrors fight in Chapter 2. We're not sure why Santino even has a Hall of Mirrors for such a prolonged throwdown, but since the prevailing concern for the John Wick design team seems to be, how cool does this look, that logical concern doesn't really matter. What does matter is that this scene provides some of the best visuals in the series, from the battle between John and the bodyguard played by Ruby Rose, to the kaleidoscopic fights where John and his opponent are surrounded by infinite reflections. Not since The Matrix Revolutions have we been excited to see Reeves duking it out with infinite identical opponents. The entire sequence is about 7 minutes of pure adrenaline, and virtually every shot is worth pausing to take it all in. Who says gracious violence can't be absolutely beautiful? Despite its unwieldy title, John Wick Chapter 3 Parabellum doesn't waste a lot of time. Within 7 minutes, John is beating a giant man to death with a book in the middle of the New York Public Library, and it doesn't slow down from there. About 15 minutes later, he's fighting people while riding a horse through Midtown Manhattan. It's a wild ride. The library fight isn't the kind of scene you pause though. Even if it is one you'll want to watch over and over again. The fight scene that follows, however, is one that'll have you freezing the action, if only to see how they manage to pull off the visual effects without actually killing any of the actors. When a group of assassins corner John in a warehouse full of antique weapons that someone has kept incredibly sharp, we get some knife throwing that goes past brutal and into hilarious territory. This scene demands to be paused for a couple of reasons. First, it's pretty fun to tally up the number of knives that John manages to huck at his opponents in 40 seconds. It's 19 if you're curious. Also, you'll want to marvel at how convincing the special effects of knives sticking out of people are. Just as our initial glimpse of John's tattoo in the first film requires pressing pause to get a good look at it, the scene in Parabellum that finds him arriving at the Tarkovsky Theater in hopes of escaping the bounty on his head demands the same. For one, there's the ballerina who has a similar tattoo, proving that while John might be the most unstoppable graduate from the director's training program, he's not the only one. This trip backstage is also full of world building that goes by just a little too quickly for obsessive fans. The other ballerinas suffering for their art, the group practicing jujitsu, and even the paintings lining the director's cozy studio are all crying out for more attention. The big attraction, though, is a golden rosary that John hands over, a ticket taken by the director that's then used to brand him with an inverted cross right on his tattoo. Of all the moments that show us the secret societies in John Wick, this is the one that feels the most insular. Everyone involved knows exactly what's going on, what's being demanded, and what the price will be. As much as we like digging through the background for details, this is one that we like to slow down just so that we can piece it all together.
You can never come home again.
John's meeting with the Elder, a mysterious assassin king who lives in the desert outside Casablanca, while dreaming up elaborate displays of fealty, doesn't exactly go well. Sure, he gets his excommunicado status eliminated, but that only lasts for about 20 minutes before he's back on the high table's bad side, and he has to pay a significant price. If you haven't seen this scene, let's just say that John takes off his wedding ring the hard way. Even by the standards of violence in this franchise, this moment is both intense and unexpected, partly because it's John doing something to himself rather than to someone else. It turns out that the only person in these movies who can really take on John Wick is John Wick himself. So whether it's your first time watching Chapter 3 or your 40th, you're going to want to take a quick break right before it happens and take a deep breath. Maybe get yourself a glass of water and mentally prepare. Just have the pause button ready for when John slides his hand across that table with the chisel on it. You'll thank us later.
The choice is yours.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.